Today, we're going to talk about how podcasts have become a bigger part of political campaign strategies than we've ever seen in the past. From Donald Trump doing podcasts with Theo Vaughn, Andrew Schultz, most recently Joe Rogan, and Kamala Harris doing the Call Her Daddy podcast or Club Shay Shay. It's one of the first times I've seen a strategy like this being employed by both parties, and it's absolutely wild. I remember 3 or 4 years ago, I thought it was absolutely insane that Budweiser was deciding to sponsor some podcasts. Do they know we say the R word? And now, not only are candidates making the podcast rounds, but some of them are even hiring comedians to speak at their rallies, like Tony Hinchcliffe at Trump's MSG rally.
If you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah, I think it's called Puerto Rico. Okay, all right.
Someone on that campaign thought that the country collectively had a good enough sense of humor to listen to a Tony Hinchcliffe said at a Trump rally and be like, yeah, everyone will get and appreciate this. This is fine. But the fact that congresswomen and vice presidential candidates are discussing things that Tony said during his set that they are now part of Donald Trump's platform is wild.
Who is that jackwad? Who is that guy?
I actually think that's Tony Hinchcliffe, which is super disappointing. He's a comedian.
What a world we live in. How did we get here? But before we get into all that, let's go ahead and thank the executive producer of today's episode, David Finkel. Without the big baller support of David Finkel, I'd probably become a talking head for the alt-right and try and figure out ways to make money off that by leading an insurrection into the Capitol to try and make money and ultimately just settle on shitting on Nancy Pelosi's desk. But thanks to David Finkel's big baller support, I don't have to shit on anyone's desk. I could just keep on doing this show. And if you'd like to become a big baller supporter of this show, you can go ahead and click the Patreon link in the description below. Now's a good time to remind you to comment, like, and subscribe. It all helps the algorithm. Welcome to Catching You Up with
Nadav.
So usually the one time I really saw comedians mix with politicians was at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, where it was kind of towards the end of the presidential term. Everyone's kind of on the same team. No one's too combative, and it's just kind of a collective roast of anyone that's political, and it was all kind of well received, except for that time where Trump refused to go the last time he was president. At least I think that's how it went down.
This is a totally unconfirmed news.
But those dinners were great and funny because for the most part, there weren't really any stakes that were going on at those White House Correspondents' Dinner. It was just everyone taking turns shitting on each other and everyone being like, yeah, that's what we're doing. And I feel like someone on someone's team saw those White House Correspondents' Dinners and was like, what if we did that like now, leading up to the election? Those were bangers. What if we just lead with a banger? I don't know why in my head the top presidential candidate advisor is some stoner that's like, what if we start with dessert? But Donald Trump has been making the rounds on a lot of podcasts that are in the Rogan sphere, and Kamala Harris has been making appearances on Call Her Daddy and Club Shay Shay, which, although are solid pods, have some really questionable pasts. I mean, Call Her Daddy used to be all about eating dudes' assholes.
I got him to go into doggy one time for me to eat it, and that's the best position for eating the ass, because then you can eat it and then you can put your hand in the front.
I mean, a month ago, Shannon Sharp went on Instagram Live clapping someone's cheeks. Maybe 2 months ago? I'll tell you what it was. If someone was like, hey, what can you tell me about Shannon Sharp? I mean, I could tell you a lot of things, but the first thing that would come to mind is, yeah, honestly, he had sex with someone on Instagram Live and everyone was kind of okay with it. I want to meet the millennial or Gen Z person on each of these teams that were the ones advising like, no, Kamala, you should go on to this podcast specifically. You want this young vote that eats ass, because if they're willing to eat ass, they're willing to support your political platform. And women that eat ass are doers. They're shakers. They're movers. Now, I'm not knocking it or saying it's a bad idea. I'm just laughing that I live in a world where I can express that thought and barely be joking. So we can all agree that the campaign landscape this year is just so much more different than any other landscape that we've seen before. But let's rewind a couple years in just podcasting. There are companies that you're aware of if you've been listening to podcasts for a while that only really sponsored on podcasts. I'm talking about Fleshlights. I'm talking about Stamps.com, Blue Chew. I'm talking about Squarespace, BetterHelp. I'm talking about MyBookie. Stuff that's just like, you've only heard of these companies if you listen to podcasts. And some of those are still around. Not that long ago, when I was on booking teams for a lot of podcasts, I remember the main reason we were able to land a guest that was seemingly out of our reach was because they had a movie they were launching, a book they were launching, some sort of project that they wanted to talk about, where to them it made more sense to talk about it on the podcast circuit as opposed to the late night talk show circuit. Because at this point, podcasts get so much more numbers than anything on television. Television hopes to hit the amount of numbers that certain podcasts get. And I mean, definitely a coincidence to bring up this quote from Tony Hinchcliffe, but here's him describing the difference between the kind of numbers that Netflix does as opposed to the numbers that Kill Tony does.
Is the roast of Tom Brady was the most watched program in Netflix's entire history.
Holy shit.
Watched over 1.5 billion minutes.
Jesus Christ.
The episode of Kill Tony with Shane Gillis as Donald Trump and Adam Ray as Joe Biden beat that 1.5 billion minutes watched to 2.5 billion minutes watched.
Wow.
It holds a YouTube record, according to the people from YouTube, for retention rate.
The longer I was in podcasting, the more and more it became clear that podcasts got better numbers than traditional TV shows. There were so many guests that I booked where afterwards they came up to me. They're like, I did Seth Meyers and then I did YMH, and I was approached on the street and people only said, hey, I loved you on Your Mom's House, or I loved you on Two Bears. And they would never mention them being on TV doing whatever random interview with Jimmy Fallon or Jimmy Kimmel. Love those guys. Jimmy Kimmel made Windy City Heat. He'll always be a baller in my heart. But people preferred to do podcast circuits instead of talk show circuits. Why is that? Old people watch TV. They don't understand the internet. Nadav, how do I watch your show? It's on the internet. If I just type your name, it will come up. Mom, I'm never telling you how to find this show. You think your mom is watching Love is Blind? Is your dad watching Physical 100? No. And I'm only going to speak on my experience as a millennial. Right now, I'm 36 years old. I know, looks pretty good on me, right? And I remember my last year of college. I don't know, let's call it 15, 16 years ago. All of my roommates said, hey, we don't want to pay for cable this year. We're just going to do high-speed internet. The old soul in me is like, but how am I going to see my shows? But also the Jewish blood running through my veins is saying, in no way are we paying $100 a month just so that we could keep seeing our shows. We'll adapt. We would buy an Xbox 360 from Costco and play the shit out of it for like 3 or 4 months, right until that last day of return, because Costco has wild return policies. And we would just return it then. And then we'd rinse and repeat it with someone else's Costco card. That's how we operated. But the 30 to 40-year-olds that cut the cords to their cable boxes in the mid-2000s, 2010, already found the niches that they like on the internet. They don't need cable anymore. But then that leaves some of these political campaigns to be like, but how do we reach these kids? And they do that by going on the podcasts that we do currently watch, what our version of TV is. and they're infiltrating pretty deeply. I can't believe that Kamala Harris hasn't done Hot Ones yet. Kamala, go on Hot Ones, or Donald, whoever wants to do it. I just want to see you guys in pain. In a way that doesn't get me on any list. But these candidates now need to go on shows that us younger people watch, and what appeals to us aren't prepared speeches and talking points. It's, what do you sound like without a script for like 1 to 3 hours? Are you a good hang? What do you look like when we pull back your politician skin? Is there a human underneath there? Or are we gonna see your lizard-like scales and black matted over eyes? Jesus Christ. All right, I'm starting to sound a little bit like Alex Jones, but I think you understand what I'm trying to say. It's show us that you're normal, but don't really show us who you are, because we all know that who you really are is absolutely ugly and disgusting, and I wouldn't let you anywhere near my children. But it's crazy. Podcasts used to be like this just small internet radio show type of environment. But let's face it, Joe Rogan is the equivalent to whatever Oprah was back in the day. Remember Oprah's book club? She used to make things become New York Times bestsellers. You know what Rogan does? People started lifting kettlebells and bow hunting and doing saunas and cold plunges. You think Oprah could do that? Oprah cannot do that. I bet the house that Oprah would not be able to convince you to put butter in your coffee. Is that podcasts have become a bigger and bigger part of the zeitgeist. They're unavoidable. I used to be fascinated when big advertisers finally made the crossover and started to advertise on podcasts, where I was like, damn, NASCAR wants to get a slice of this? Wait, McDonald's is making us do a sponsored ad read right next to DoorDash and Uber Eats? And just when I thought that was the thing to get excited about, boom, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump start making podcast rounds, and it's like, whoa. And the point of this video isn't that, oh, it's a huge mistake for presidential candidates to get involved with comedy podcasts or comedians in general. It's, look how far we've come. The outliers of society. The people that even Netflix wouldn't give time to. The people that big time television said, no, you know what? We don't think you're a star. We're not giving you the spotlight. They're taking the spotlight. And other people are now just reinforcing that they deserve it. What a time. And look, I'm not politically swayed in either direction. There's pros and cons to each candidate, and honestly, discussing any of that is not fun to me. But think about it. Remember when Barack Obama went on Mark Maron's WTF podcast to talk about his healthcare plan? That was in 2015, and that was huge, and that hasn't really happened since then that much. Now, Kamala has done like 2 podcast appearances on some huge podcasts, and Donald Trump and his running mate have done like 4 or 5 appearances in total on some podcasts. Shit is getting nutty. And it is interesting as hell to see which party is doing what and why. You know, there's a saying that I think applies to both parties in this situation. And it's the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit, but wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. I mean, even Jon Stewart didn't really have anything bad to say about Tony Hinchcliffe's set.
Now, obviously, in retrospect, having a roast comedian come to a political rally a week before Election Day and roasting a key voting demographic, probably not the best decision by the campaign politically. But to be fair, the guy's really just doing what he does. I mean, here he is at the Tom Brady roast a few months ago.
Jeff is so Jewish, he only watches football for the coin toss. Gronk, you look like the Nazi that kept burning himself on the ovens. Kevin is so small that when his ancestors picked cotton, they called it deadlifting.
Yes, of course. Terrible, boo, yes. There's something wrong with me. I find that guy very funny. So, I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, bringing him to a rally and have him not do roast jokes, that'd be like bringing Beyonce to a rally and not have... Oh.
Was it a weird environment to put a comedian in? Probably. Was it the first time it's ever been done? Take a look at this Don Rickles set from the Ronald Reagan rally.
Be funny.
First black kid I ever saw that'll definitely never play basketball.
That's a wild opening joke. But I guess the whole point of this episode is really just me masturbating at the fact that, wow, podcasts are finally big enough to become political pawns in someone's presidential campaign. Isn't that neat? Isn't that cool how far we've come? What a wild time to be alive. Either way, doing a set at a political rally is wild and takes gigantic balls. And for that, I applaud the shit out of Tony Hinchcliffe. I think very few people would have said yes to that, and I think he did a decent job at it. My skin is already crawling at the thought of politics infiltrating everything that I know and love once again 4 years from now. And with that, I'd like to say thank you for everyone that you're seeing on screen right now. They are all producers of this show. Without their help, it'd be much harder to put this together as consistently and as regularly as I do. And if you'd like to become a producer of the show, you can go ahead and click the Patreon link in the description below. Thanks for watching this apolitical/political episode of Catching You Up with
Nadav, it's okay to die.
But most importantly, I'd like to remind you that this is all totally...
This is a totally unconfirmed news.
We'll see you next week.